You're listening to Boomers Today with your host, Frank Samson.
Well, welcome to Boomers Today. I'm your host, Frank Samson. Of course, each week we bring you important, useful information on issues facing baby boomers, their parents, and other loved ones. And we have a special show for you today. It's kind of doing a little reverse role here. As you know, I interview people all the time in the industry. But today, I'm on the other side. I guess I'm the interviewee here. And we have with us Marcy Baskin. Marcy is the Managing Director of Senior Care Authority, who's also Senior Care Authority, a sponsor of Boomers Today. Marcy brought to my attention recently that, and I kind of didn't even realize it, that we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary at Senior Care Authority. And she said, Frank, maybe why don't I interview you on Boomers Today? And I said, okay, that'd be interesting. A little role reversal here. So I'm going to really turn it over to Marcy here, and she's going to throw out the questions to me. But I'm thrilled. It was a great idea, and thrilled to talk about Senior Care Authority and the industry. And so, Marcy, thanks for this wonderful idea, and glad to have you on the show.
Thanks for agreeing to it, Frank. Well, before we talk about Senior Care Authority, maybe you can talk a little bit about your thoughts on being an entrepreneur, a serial one at that.
Yeah, I guess so.
and why you chose your career that way.
Well, I everybody's different. There's some people that kind of enjoy, working for somebody, getting that paycheck every week or every 2 weeks, and having that security. And there's certainly a lot of advantages to that. I guess I was just my father was somebody who spent a lot of time in his own business, totally different industry. He was in the insurance business, and I guess I was brought up around that. And I found out early on in my career that I was probably one of the hardest workers ever, but I was also probably one of the lousiest employees ever. And I say that only because I always questioned whoever I reported to. I remember having I was in sales, and I had a sales manager that would require us to put in these sales reports. Well, at that time, we didn't have, even Microsoft Word. I mean, you really hand wrote your sales reports. And I just knew when I wrote those reports that he wasn't reading them. And I knew that because I would ask him questions in there and he would never respond. So I just, in one of my reports, I used some choice words about him and figured I'm either going to get fired or I'll never hear from him. I never heard from him, so I knew he wasn't reading the report, so I was refused to do the report. So I was that type of a person. I was just, if I didn't like the way something was done, I was pretty vocal about it. So, I guess with that, I just felt it was better for me to have my own, and I had my own in the travel industry, and now Senior Care Authority started about, as you brought up to me, started about 10 years ago, and started franchising it 5 years later. But I got into the business. You wanted to ask how I got into it?
I wanted to ask the questions.
Oh, go ahead. See, I'm not used to it. I'm not used to playing this other role here.
I know.
So go ahead.
Well, tell us about starting your placement agency. You and your wife started a placement agency in Sonoma, California in 2009.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'll tell you what led into it. I was always, I was one that was always more of a futuristic reader. I would read nonfiction, kind of boring stuff. And I remember reading the book Future Shock by Alvin Toffler. And I was always reading more futuristic type of things, like what's going to happen when? What's going to happen here? And the boomer generation, some people are critical of the boomer generation, but I always thought, what's going to happen when all of us start really getting older and aging? What's going to happen? So I was always just interested in the senior population, and after going through a whole lot with my own parents, who both unfortunately passed away 7 weeks apart from one another, and went through a whole lot with them. And then ironically, right before that happened, I had sold a company that I had started in the travel industry. And I sold it because I just wanted to start doing something else. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I decided to sell it, and I was going to take some time off and figure it out. And then shortly after, I lost both my parents, and a light bulb went off. And I said, hey, maybe this is the industry I want to get into. So I spent a good year researching the industry, and kind of here we are.
Okay. What made you choose placement instead of another type of senior business?
In placement, what I learned during my research was that it was more of a consultative type of role. I was consulting with families, and I've always been more of an advisor in anything I did in my life. I did manage a lot of people in my past, and I didn't want to do that again. I don't have any problem having employees and creating jobs. I'm all for that. But having a lot of, hundreds or thousands of people kind of reporting into me, that's not what I want to do. And I felt that the placement side was just that. It was more consulting. And I didn't like the fact of I came from the travel industry, and as you know, that the travel industry is very competitive price-wise. You're always looking for the best deal. Everybody's trying to get you to come down in price. And with placement, our services, in most cases in placement, we're getting compensated by the assisted living location that we're provide. We provide options. But if that family chooses that particular assisted living location, we get paid by the assisted living location. Therefore, we're not in a price war of the family coming to us and going, can you get it to me for this? Can you get it to me for that? Mm-hmm. Certainly, we're going to try and negotiate the best deal for them, but we're not charging them anything. So those two things, three things, helping families, in this, helping seniors, as well as not having, being price competitive and getting paid pretty handsomely from the assisted living locations.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah. I did look, by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I did look at home care, and, though I have great respect for the people that are in the home care business, I just didn't want to manage a number of caregivers and do that. So I know a lot of people think of senior care, they think of home care, and that's not, of course, as you know, that's not what we do.
Right. So do you remember the first family you helped when you opened your agency?
I did. I do.
What was that like?
It was rewarding. It was, I learned a lot, let's put it that way. It was a very difficult situation. I was dealing with a daughter whose father had Lewy body dementia, was already in a memory care location, and it was extremely expensive. And I learned early on, because she told me that when he was diagnosed, they were sitting on close to $1 million. Mm-hmm. And when they contacted me, they were coming close to running out of money. Mm-hmm. So it was really an eye-opener for me. And even though she reached out to me for help, that maybe to move the father to a location that would be less expensive, it was pretty hard on her and the rest of the family to have to move the father, who was probably pretty close to the end. And but they were running out of money, and the place that they were at said, "Hey, you're going to have to pay the bills, right?" And I guess I always just felt I'm going to do what I think was right, And I thought what was right is I first just tried to renegotiate on behalf of the family a better deal for them at where they were staying. And that's what I did.
So you were an advocate for the family.
I was an advocate for the family.
We find that a lot in this business, that we are advocates more than anything.
Yeah, and fortunately, they were able to keep their father there. He passed away 6 months later, but they didn't have to go move him and go through the pain of moving again and putting the family through more stress.
So you must have felt pretty good about that.
I felt good, and it just made me want more. I just, I just felt that, and that's what I try to build Senior Care Authority on, is just doing the right thing for families.
Any aha moments you can share during the last 10 years related to the business?
Yeah, I think, we're doing this podcast right now, and I've been doing, I started out doing a radio show before adding a podcast to it. I still do the radio show, but I started doing the radio show in 2010. I started up the business in 2009, and I made a proposal to a local radio station here to do this show. And they accepted the proposal because I felt it was important to educate listeners and let them know resources, and I told them I'd interview doctors and lawyers and people in the industry. And so they go, yeah, let's do it, and we still do the show today. And what the aha moment was is I thought that by having this show, I'd have a bunch of listeners who would then call me up and go, Frank, I need your help. And even though that happened, all right, what really happened is where I was getting a lot of my business from were the people that I interviewed. So those doctors or those lawyers or those home care companies or the people within the senior services and healthcare industry, they were so appreciative that I took the time to interview them that they wanted to work together and give referrals to one another. So that aha moment was, that's where I'm going to get my business from. Not marketing direct to the consumer, which is kind of a needle in a haystack in our business, but build relationships with those in the industry and refer back and forth to one another. And that's how I started building the business.
Well, and that is the model of Senior Care Authority.
That is the model.
Which will lead me into the fact that we have quite many franchises now across the country.
Yeah.
And so I want to ask you, if it's a simple enough answer for this show, why did you decide to franchise?
Well, I spent the first, 4 years, so from 2009 to 2013, building the local business here in Northern California. And I do have a background in franchising. I franchised a company in the travel industry, and I had almost 200 franchises. So I had knowledge about franchising. But I wasn't sure if that's the route I wanted to go. In order to make a decision to franchise, you have to make sure that the model works, first of all. There are people that just start franchising before they see if it works, and that's not a good thing. You want to make sure the model works. That's what people buy into. I thought about doing the Starbucks model, going out and hiring people and setting up around the country. That's a big expense and also a lot of time. And one of the greatest thrills that I got when I franchised before was helping others succeed in their own businesses. So I said, here's a business that's working, and I was proud of it. Could I help others and teach them this business so then they could make it successful in their own markets? And that's really what I did. And I, as much as and you know this, we talk about it all the time, how much we enjoy working with families and helping those families. And though I don't do as much of that as like you do on a day-to-day basis, I really get a thrill out of, having our own franchise owners say, hey, I'm helping families and I'm building my business and I'm profitable, and it's a wonderful feeling. And so that's a way to build the brand and build it in a way where others are helping you do that. And we're doing that around the country now and into Canada as well now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've had incredible growth. When I met you, you still had your placement agency.
Yep. Well, we still do, but
Like,
but that's all we had.
it's mine now.
Yeah, now it's yours. Right.
Well, I think you kind of answered what I was formulating in my mind to ask you if you had any insights on franchising, but I think you gave us some pretty good.
Well, I think somebody who is looking to set up their own business, franchising is a wonderful way to go if the concept is what you want to do. Because if you buy the right franchise, they've already built the model. They've built the template. We always use the term to our franchise owners, just follow the yellow brick road. Mm-hmm. Now, we're not a McDonald's, and sometimes the perception of a franchise, McDonald's comes into people's heads. We're not a McDonald's. We don't tell people, like they do, saying, hey, when you throw the French fries in there, cook it for so long, right. Flip the burgers after this amount of time. You have to buy all your buns from us. You have to, so you can still be a franchise and not be that rigid. And I have to say that, and I think you would agree, that we're not that rigid. Mm-mm. However, we have guidelines, we have templates, we have a system that works, and if people kind of follow it, they have a much greater chance of success. And we've seen that a lot of, and though we have had, fortunately it's been very minimal. We've had a couple failures, but I think that the failures were due to the fact that they just kind of did it on their own. They didn't want to follow the system.
Didn't follow the model.
They didn't follow the model, mm-hmm. and you just need to follow the model. I spent 5 years perfecting the model. All right, mm-hmm. So somebody that's starting out, it would be good to mm-hmm. kind of follow the system.
So who buys a franchise from Senior Care Authority?
Well, it's interesting because I'll tell you, I'm going to give it a two-part answer mm-hmm. here. I'll tell you who I thought would be buying a franchise from Senior Care Authority when I started, and then I'll tell you how that's changed. Who I thought would be buying a franchise were going to be people within the healthcare industry, like a nurse who maybe, many nurses are overworked and underpaid, mm-hmm. And they're burnt out, or a social worker who's already working with families. And that's who I thought our market was going to be. And we do have some nurses, mm-hmm. as you know, in our, in part of it. But what I learned is that we find, people who have strong, they come from corporate America. They have great marketing skills, and many of them with great, sales skills, or just, they know how to network. And the one common thread that we've seen with the far majority of them is they've gone through working with a family member. They've gone through it themselves with a loved one, whether it be a parent, a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle. They've gone through it. They've seen how difficult it is, and they want to then, during their research, they come across us and say, God, I didn't realize there was a business that does this, a franchise that does this.
Many of us had those family situations
exactly
before this type of business was available.
Right. Now,
so we knew what it was like.
Now, is that a prerequisite? No. It's mm-hmm. not a prerequisite. We have several that, really haven't gone through with a family member. Mm-hmm. I always tell people, if they have that experience, unfortunately, that's wonderful experience.
Yeah.
Boot
camp.
Right, it's boot camp. So I guess to answer your question, the bulk of them, not all of them, the bulk of them, they came from corporate America. They got tired of corporate America. They wanted to do their own thing. They have gone through this with a family member. They have great networking and people skills. And those are our franchises. Those mm-hmm. are our most successful franchises.
Yeah, agreed.
And we teach them the business,
mm-hmm.
and they're anxious to learn it.
Okay, so I want to make sure that I mention the fact that you published a book.
I did.
A couple of years ago.
Yeah, you actually helped me with it a little bit, huh?
Did I?
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I helped him with it.
Yeah, so I published the book because, as you know, we've been doing this podcast, and somebody said to me, I listened to your podcasts, and what wonderful information is in your podcasts. I mean, it's just a wealth of information, talking to people, almost every week on various subject matters. It's just a wealth of information. Have you ever thought about, kind of transcribing them and turning them into a book? And I said, that's kind of interesting. But I thought it would be kind of boring to just transcribe them, question, answer, and put them in a book. So what I did is I kind of, even though I didn't use this person's name, it was a family member that I worked with. And it was a very difficult case, was a very difficult situation. And kind of went through the process and helping her, introducing her to various resources in the industry. And basically, if I introduced her, let's say, to an attorney, well, the questions and answers of that attorney from that podcast was what we incorporated in the book. So it was a story that incorporated a lot of the questions and answers in the book. We called it the Aging Boomers, and it was fun. I enjoyed doing it, and we've had a lot of great reviews on it. And
well, it helps people to see that making senior care decisions is not a straight line from A to B.
Right.
There's many decisions, and I think that's what we do really well. We help people make decisions.
Right, exactly.
Every step of the way.
Yep, yeah.
Okay.
And then I don't know if maybe you were going to ask it, but then you're going to go ahead and ask about that. Well, so what was kind of exciting, I was approached by an organization that did some research and came across our company and says, we're coming out with a book. And we did some research on your company, and we'd like to get some more information from you because we're thinking about the possibility of including you and the company in this book called Dynamic Founders of the 21st Century. So I was kind of taken back by it, and I thought it was kind of interesting. And they kind of interviewed me, and then they came back and said, yeah, we would love to include your information. So it just came out, and it's called Dynamic Founders of the 21st Century. And Senior Care Authority and myself and our, what we do as an organization is highlighted in that book. So it was kind of neat.
Do you have time to tell us about some of the recognition you've gotten from the Franchise Review Board?
Yeah, so
Franchise Business Review.
Yeah, I mean, there are third-party organizations out there because, anybody could go out and put together and say we're a franchise, but it's nice to have third-party organizations that review our information, they review our financial information, they review our contract, which is called a franchise disclosure document. And they actually talk to our franchisees. They but they question our franchisees to see if
they do a survey.
They do a very detailed survey. It's called Franchise Business Review, and we've gotten some pretty good accolades from them as one of the top low-cost franchises, top women-owned franchises, and then the thing that the area that makes me most proud is showing that we're one of the top franchises based upon the surveys that are done from our franchisees saying that we're doing well. We're doing well. They're happy with us. So that's pretty exciting. I was pretty proud because I always went, being in the franchise industry before, and you always kind of looked at Entrepreneur Magazine and their top 500 list. Top 500 franchise was always one that you always really looked at. That would be kind of neat, and most recently we were honored to be part of that Entrepreneur 500 list. So that was pretty exciting.
Well, pretty big accomplishments.
Yeah.
So my question, I know we don't have a lot of time, but my last question is: so you've had a lot of success in more than one business. You know how to do a lot of things. You're really creative. What's next? Retirement or?
Well, first of all, I want to say, if I had to do this alone, we wouldn't be here talking. People like yourself and we have a tremendous team of people.
Mm-hmm.
We have great franchise owners,
Mm-hmm.
who also provide us wonderful ideas. So, yeah, okay, I started it,
Mm-hmm.
but you still have to surround yourself with the best people, and I think we do a pretty good job with that. So, thank you personally for that.
You're welcome.
And we
Thank
got
you.
we got a great team of people on that. As far as what's next, I love what I'm doing. I'm healthy, so I plan on doing this for a while. But I think if it did come a time that was time for me to move on to something else and hand over the reins, and you see this too. We see so many families that are have a challenge of finding housing for their loved ones and care for their loved ones, and they can't afford it. And unfortunately, we're happen to be in the United States is a wonderful country, but also it's pretty challenging with medical costs and all of that. And I would love to be able to set up a nonprofit one day to be able to help those people that can't afford housing. And so I think about that all the time. But don't have any plans yet. But
You're staying put for now.
I'm staying put.
Okay.
You have to put up with me for a while longer. All right.
I think everybody in the network will be glad to hear that.
Yeah. So So thank you, and certainly anybody that wants to learn more about our company, they could go to our website at www.seniorcareauthority.com. If they're interested in a franchise, there's a section there that they could go to. But that's the same web address, seniorcareauthority.com/franchise, and they can learn more about maybe owning a franchise in their area as well. So, but thanks for your wonderful idea. And by the way, happy anniversary.
Oh, happy anniversary.
Yeah, happy anniversary. Yeah.
Great.
All right, great. So
Thank you, Frank, for joining us today.
thank you, Marcy, for doing this. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I was a little nervous. I'm not as nervous doing the interviews, but having to be on the other side is a little different.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Be safe out there. Talk to y'all
You've
soon.
been listening to Boomers Today with Frank Samson. To learn more about today's show, visit boomerstodayradio.com and join us next time for another edition of Boomers Today.